McLaren's boss, Andrea Stella, has expressed his worries about the upcoming GP in Qatar, as his team has found itself losing some form in Brazil and Las Vegas, and they hold just a 24-point lead ahead of Ferrari in P2. The Woking-based squad will now have 2 races and 1 sprint event to hold the lead, but it looks like their chances are not that great, as Ferrari are looking very strong in the finishing phases of the race. With all this in mind, can Qatar prove pivotal for the championship race? And if so, how can McLaren redeem themselves from the slump they've entered into recently? It's safe to say that the Constructors' Championship is the most interesting part of the 2024 season, as Ferrari have managed to climb up to P2 and challenge McLaren for the leading spot, mostly because the MCL38 has suffered from the cold conditions in Brazil and Las Vegas, while the next 2 tracks should favour their car to a greater extent. The fact that Norris lost the championship fight with Verstappen and is under threat to lose the P2 position against Leclerc gives McLaren even more motivation for the last 2 races against Ferrari. When talking about the Las Vegas GP, a race that was dominated by Mercedes due to the cold conditions that prevailed in the desert, Stella explained, "Well, it's disappointing that we lost 12 points in the championship, but at the same time, considering how much we struggled this weekend, somehow we really have to thank Mercedes for having performed so strongly and secured the P1, P2 position. Otherwise, Ferrari would have been an even bigger threat in the Constructors' Championship." Of course, the bigger advantage goes in favour of the MCL38 because of their high-speed corner behaviour of the car. But even with that, Stella has warned that the competition is very close, and Ferrari have found a form that could prove to be pivotal for the remainder of the season. When talking about it, Stella said, "It's true, and I've said myself that Qatar and Abu Dhabi should be a territory that is more suitable for the way we have designed our car. But at the same time, I think we need to be careful that the level of the top teams in Formula 1 in 2024, in my view, is unprecedented. I really can't remember a season in Formula 1 where 4 teams were operating at such high levels. I would expect Ferrari, certainly even Red Bull and Mercedes. I think they will have gotten quite a lot of information from this weekend as well to be in condition to win in Qatar." On the other hand, Norris feels like there have been some limitations on the car that proved to be extremely difficult to tackle in Las Vegas, and that they might present themselves in Qatar as well. Of course, the Mini DRS has been the greatest talking point of this GP, and when talking about McLaren's title ambitions that were helped by Mercedes, Norris said, "Yeah, you could say that they helped us, but that doesn't really matter. For us, of course, it matters. I don't think of those things. I think how bad our car was today. That's what worries me. Mercedes being strong, how poor we've been all weekend. Clearly, we have a lot of work to do with our car. It's too difficult to drive. It doesn't work in these conditions. The graining has been a complaint of mine for the last 6 years, and again, we've still not been able to iron it out and get it out enough from our car. Some tracks are more limited on certain things. These issues don't arise, but we've always been one of the worst teams for front graining. I feel like I've driven very well in those races, such as Mexico. When we do our front graining, we're not the quickest car, but as soon as the front graining is gone, we have a car that is quick enough. The maximisation of the potential is going to be very, very important here, because the tarmac is pretty much new and the situation is quite difficult for the teams to understand the behaviour of their cars, because while it's in the desert and while it's going to be under the night lights, it's not going to be similar to Las Vegas. The air temperature here will be much hotter, around 20 degrees, and given the fact that there is little to no cloud coverage during the day, the darker nature of the asphalt can accumulate more heat throughout the day, and that means it will be harder for it to release it on the surface. So graining shouldn't be as big of a problem as keeping your temperature at the optimal working temperature. On the other hand, Leclerc expects that the struggles will continue in Qatar due to the nature of the track, as the opposite condition of Las Vegas is going to prove crucial for the power of the SF24. Of course, there are tons of other factors that are affecting the result of the car, and he expects McLaren to be very strong at the Losail GP, further adding, Yeah, it's going to be very difficult until the very end. I think McLaren are going to be very strong in Qatar, so we've got to have a good weekend, and I would be very surprised if we recover points from them, but we've got to, so we'll do our best, but I expect it to be tricky. Sainz, similar to Leclerc, has been quite pessimistic about the opportunities in Losail, and when talking about it, he pointed at Red Bull as one of the primary rivals for the Maranello team, apart from McLaren and Mercedes, further stating, in Qatar, the maximum might be a P5 or P6 because this car on a track like Qatar, I expect to struggle, and I expect McLaren and Mercedes to be very strong. Also, even Red Bull, given that they were strong also in quali in Austin. So yeah, I think it's going to be a very challenging weekend for us. That is why today it was important for us to get the maximum number of points available. And of course, the situation is extremely important to be normalised in Ferrari after their latest feud in Las Vegas, and this is something that has been discussed by Vasseur himself. The Frenchman believes that the priority of the team comes first, and a situation like the one that happened between the two drivers in Las Vegas is not going to be tolerable, regardless of the fact that this duo is going to share the stage as teammates for 2 more races. When talking about it, Vasseur said, "We have to avoid fighting, but at this stage, I think that opening the stint, you have to be really on the management side. Carlos was already lap 3 or 4 of the stint, but I think it's more the fact that the situation was already difficult for everybody. We will discuss tonight. It won't be an issue. We will have to discuss situations like this because at that stage of the race that we were discussing with Carlos for the pit stop, he was already in the shadow of Lawson and Tsunoda, and perhaps he wanted to pit, but we wanted to keep him on track. We were discussing like this, and on the top we had to swap, and it was a bit of the chaos, but when they arrive in the car they have their own vision of this, but don't worry, we will discuss it." And apart from Ferrari, there are high hopes that Mercedes will perform well because of the circumstances that have presented themselves on the grid. Of course, it's the polar opposite of what happened in the Nevada desert, but nevertheless, the situation has developed to the point of Mercedes hoping that even these conditions can be positive for their car. This is a circuit on which Mercedes is expecting to perform well too, as Toto Wolff expressed his positivity about the behaviour of the W15 under the night lights in Losail. When talking about it, the Austrian said that while it's very different conditions between Las Vegas and Losail, the optimism is still here. Further elaborating, the races in Vegas and Qatar couldn't be more different. The Losail International Circuit has many high-speed sections and few, if any, big braking zones. Despite going there later than last year, it will still be very warm. That is in contrast to the cool conditions and many slow-speed sections of Las Vegas. Nevertheless, we're aiming for another strong showing this weekend. The W15 has looked more at home at circuits with lots of high-speed corners such as Silverstone or Spa. We certainly benefited from the nighttime cold in Las Vegas, but the layout in Qatar should be more favourable to the strengths of our car. We know our competitors will be stronger than they were last weekend, but we will be aiming to get the car in a good window once again and be in the fight at the front. With all this in mind, do you think that McLaren has a genuine shot at sealing the championship with the fact that they have a sprint event in which they can maximise the result against Ferrari? And more importantly, do you think the Mercedes can get into the mix and steal a point or two from these two teams? Let us know in the comments below.